It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah and her friends decided to explore the abandoned mansion at the edge of town. Rumors surrounded the house, with tales of eerie screams and ghostly shadows that appeared after midnight. Curiosity got the better of them, and armed with flashlights, they stepped inside the creaking doors. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of decay and dust. Every step they took echoed loudly in the vast emptiness. Sarah's heart pounded as they entered the grand hall, where a massive chandelier hung precariously, its crystals covered in cobwebs. On the walls, faded portraits of unknown people seemed to watch them, their eyes following their every move. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" whispered Alex, his voice trembling. "It's just an old house," Sarah replied, though even she wasn't convinced by her own words. As they climbed the grand staircase, the sound of a faint whisper made them freeze. It seemed to come from the shadows above. "Did you hear that?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. No one answered, but the fear in their eyes spoke volumes. As they reached the top of the stairs, they noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the corridor. It wasn't on any of the blueprints Sarah had studied earlier. Intrigued and terrified, they approached the door cautiously. The room was unlike the rest of the house. It was spotless, as if it had been untouched by time. A single chair sat in the center, and on the floor, an ornate circle was carved into the wood. Strange symbols surrounded the circle, glowing faintly in the darkness. "What is this?" whispered Emma, stepping closer. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The room seemed to grow colder, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled their chests. The carved circle began to emit a strange hum, and a shadowy figure started to form within it. Alex screamed, trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, his voice breaking. The shadow figure raised its head, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. Its voice was low and guttural, as it spoke in a language none of them understood. The shadow figure stepped out of the circle, its form shifting and flickering like smoke. The air grew suffocating, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She clutched her flashlight tightly, its beam flickering as if struggling to stay alive. The figure pointed toward Emma, who suddenly gasped, clutching her chest. I can't breathe." She choked, her eyes wide with terror. "Let her go," Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. The figure tilted its head as if studying them, before whispering something inaudible. The walls of the room began to warp, and the carved symbols on the floor pulsed with light. It was as if the house itself had come alive, feeding on their fear. Alex grabbed a heavy book from a nearby shelf and hurled it at the figure, but it passed through as if it wasn't there. The shadow laughed, a deep, bone-chilling sound that made them all shudder. "We have to destroy the circle," Sarah yelled, realizing it was the source of the figure's power. Without wasting another moment, Sarah lunged toward the glowing circle. Her fingers trembled as she tried to erase the symbols with her shoe, but the carvings were too deep. "It's not working," she cried, her voice echoing in the cursed room. Alex, still panicking, grabbed a piece of broken wood from the corner. "Use this!" he shouted, tossing it to her. Sarah caught it and began furiously scraping at the carvings. Sparks flew as the wood connected with the glowing floor, but the circle seemed to resist her efforts, pulsing brighter with each strike. Emma collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The shadow loomed over her, its hollow eyes narrowing. "She won't make it if we don't hurry," Alex yelled, pounding his fists on the door in frustration. Suddenly, the symbols on the floor flickered, and a high-pitched screech filled the room. The shadow recoiled for a moment, giving Sarah the opportunity to strike harder. With one final effort, she managed to chip away at a section of the circle. The room shook violently as the glow of the symbols dimmed, and the shadow let out a piercing scream. It dissolved into a swirling mist, retreating back into the broken circle. For a moment, everything went still. The door creaked open on its own, and Emma gasped, finally able to breathe. "We did it," Sarah whispered, her hands still trembling. As they hurried out of the room, the house itself seemed to groan, as if displeased by their escape. The walls creaked, and the air felt heavier with every step they took. The staircase, once grand and solid, now looked unstable, its steps cracking beneath their weight. "Don't stop, just keep moving," Sarah urged, pulling Emma along. But as they reached the front door, it slammed shut before them. The entire house seemed to pulsate, as though alive. Alex grabbed the handle, tugging with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. "What now?" he yelled, his voice cracking under the pressure. From the darkness behind them, a familiar whisper emerged. The shadow, though weakened, was not gone. Its guttural voice echoed through the house, sending chills down their spines. "You cannot leave." Sarah turned to face the darkness, her fear replaced by determination. "You have no power anymore," she shouted. "The circle is broken." The shadow didn't respond, but instead began to stretch and expand, its form twisting into unnatural shapes. The walls of the house seemed to close in around them, and the temperature dropped further. "Light!" Sarah screamed. "Use the light!" Alex and Emma fumbled with their flashlights, pointing them at the advancing shadow. The beams flickered and wavered, but as they focused together, the shadow recoiled. It let out a deafening roar before retreating into the depths of the house. The front door suddenly flew open, and the group didn't hesitate. They ran out into the cold night, gasping for air as the mansion loomed behind them. As Sarah, Alex, and Emma stood outside the mansion, their breaths visible in the cold night air, a heavy silence enveloped them. The house, now shrouded in darkness, seemed lifeless, yet its ominous presence lingered. "Is it over?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah stared at the mansion, her mind racing. "I don't know," she admitted. "We broke the circle, but it felt like the house was alive, like it won't let us go that easily." Alex shook his head, his hands still trembling. "We shouldn't have come here. Some things are meant to stay buried." They turned to leave, desperate to distance themselves from the cursed place. As they reached the edge of the property, the wind picked up, carrying with it a faint, haunting whisper. "You can't escape." Emma froze, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" "No," Sarah lied, though she heard it as clearly as the others. "Let's just go." The group walked in silence, but the sense of dread never left them. Even when they returned to their homes, the events of the night haunted their dreams. Weeks later, Sarah sat alone in her room, staring at the journal she had found in the mansion. She hadn't told the others about it, fearing what they might say. The pages were filled with warnings, written by someone who had lived in the house decades ago. One entry caught her attention. "The shadow cannot be destroyed. It is bound to the house and to those who enter it. They may leave, but they take a piece of it with them." Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror and froze. Behind her, in the dim light, a faint shadow flickered. The curse had followed her home. Thank you for watching this dark and spine-chilling video. If you're a fan of horror and mystery, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps us create more terrifying stories and eerie content. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the horrors lurking in the shadows. We want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments. What part of this story gave you chills? Do you have any creepy tales or ideas you'd like us to bring to life? We're always looking for the scariest stories to share. Stay tuned for more darkness ahead. If you dare,